Crockett Cup 1987. It's your buddy Mike Messier. And yes, I am one of the few remaining wrestling fans that were in attendance as a very small young child. Crockett Cup 1987. You couldn't tell by looking at me that I was there. And I'm going to tell you the story of Magnum TA walking to the ring, of Tully Blanchard and Lex Luger, of Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff, the SuperPowers, the Road Warriors, the Midnight Express, the new combination of Sweet Stan and Beautiful Bobby. All the wonderful things that happened at that show I'm going to discuss. And you might be wondering, why should I give a flying fuck? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because I don't think wrestling fans today can handle an event like the Crockett Cup 1987. And I'll give you a site example, okay? WrestleMania, I believe it was 34 this past year, that had Kevin Owens versus Chris Jericho, AJ Styles versus Shane McMahon, ad nauseum until we got to the main event, or the final show of the match, which was Undertaker versus Roman Reigns. Before that, you had Brock and Goldberg. But point is, everyone complained, Seth Rollins and Triple H, everyone complained, or a lot of people complained, about how long the show was. Oh, the show was long. Well, what the fuck are you? Are you a wrestling fan? Or are you looking at the time? Oh, the show is over 2 hours long. Oh. Back in my day, we'd go to 4.5 hours, okay, of Baltimore Arena, 1987, not pay-per-view, sitting there in the Baltimore Arena watching 4.5 hours of wrestling, okay? Tag team wrestling, every match a tag team match. Then we'd have the second intermission of the night, I think. I think there was two, I can't remember. And you come back and you have a steel cage put up for Ole Anderson and Big Bubba. That's what we did when we were wrestling fans, 4.5 hours, okay? Things started, I think, 7, and it was going all night. So don't tell me, okay, about your problems being a wrestling fan. What else? Crockett Cup 87, the first night. Now, I'll give you a little backstory. My friend who got the tickets, we were both very small children. He's like, oh, he just tried to order the second night, but I think he accidentally, on purpose, with his father's credit card or whatever the fuck, ordered both nights. So we ended up going to both shows and seeing great wrestling action, real man wrestling. Now this is about 3 weeks after fucking WrestleMania 3. So the whole world's revolving, the whole wrestling world and pop culture world is in wrestling fever over Hulk Hogan and fucking Andre the Giant, Ricky Steamboat, Randy Savage. But that did not necessarily transcend to the Baltimore Arena, where there was a few thousand fans short of a sellout, okay? So, yeah, it was competition days back then. And the competition, the war between NWA/WCW and WWF at the time did not start, it wasn't the holy grail of the Monday Night Wars. That war was going on for a whole generation or two before that, okay? Now, the Crockett Cup, from my vantage point, was awesome. The first night, we had really good close seats. We were actually sitting in the wrong chairs. So we were very close. I have photographs of that night. It was a great show, great night. And it was just long, but it was great. We weren't complaining. So give me some more wrestling. And in fact, I'll give you a really important stat and fact. There was supposed to be 24 tag teams in this tournament. And the Rock and Roll Express, who I hated, because I didn't like them, Ricky Morton had an eye injury, a detached retina. So Robert Gibson comes to the ring and explains that his partner's injured. And I believe it was the ring announcer, Gary Michael Capetta. They just basically said the Rock and Roll Express is out of the tournament, blah, blah, blah. Now, in the weeks leading up to the fucking Crockett Cup 87 on TBS and everything else, they were telling us ad nauseum that there would be 2 substitute teams available for the Crockett Cup in case anything happened, anything happened to any of the teams, they'd have 2 backup teams on standby. So me and my buddy, the night after the first Crockett Cup 87, we were sitting there having just watched, I guess we watched 15 or 16 wrestling matches. It was the first 2 rounds of a 24 or 23 team tournament, and we're like, well, who are they going to substitute? We're trying to figure out who they're going to substitute for the show the next night, because the way the brackets broke down was that whoever got the substitute bid was going to get a bye right into the quarterfinals. So we were just pontificating who's going to get this, and we were thinking maybe the Gladiators, who were this jobber weird tag team that just lost to the Mulkeys in the Mulkey Mania match. Okay, that's how much. See, that's a couple of wrestling fans who weren't looking for an opt-out or an excuse. How do we see less wrestling, or can they make these matches quicker, or whatever the fuck? We wanted more goddamn wrestling, okay? What's next? First night highlights. The Midnight Express, the Sweet Stan, Beautiful Bobby team were really a highlight. I do have tapes of the Crockett Cup. I'd have to watch them, or DVDs, I should say. So Sweet Stan and Beautiful Bobby, that was very exciting. We did not, I think they might have been on TV once before that, but I'm also thinking it's possible it was a shockaroonie to see Sweet Stan out there. And of course, we all knew who he was from the Fabulous Ones. And my big deal, and it still is why couldn't they call these guys the Fabulous Midnights? Or the Fabulous Midnight Express, or something, or here's Fabulous Stan Lane of the new Midnight Express, or something of that nature. But in any event, the Garvins, I was a big Garvins fan, big Ronnie Garvin fan. And the Garvins were disqualified. Just trying to tap into that memory bank, my brain, my noggin. The opening match, I think I was even still a little pissy because it was supposed to be this tag team called the Kansas City Jayhawks, Bobby Jaggers and Dutch Mantel. Okay? And the way I remember it, I'm trying to think which one of those guys didn't show up. It might have been Mantel didn't show up because suddenly the other guy, I guess it was Jaggers, and if I have this wrong, I'm sorry, but one of them had like Rocky King or some other substitute guy who wasn't as good. And like, it's one of those deals where you take a mid-level tag team guy who's like a pretty good tag team, in a pretty good tag team, and then you mix him up with some job or jabroni, and it's just not the same. And then that lowers the stock of that team. So I was such a dick in the ass to myself that I was like looking, because the Crockett Cup a year earlier, 86, you still had kind of the end days of the territory system. By the time we got to Crockett Cup 87, if you really look at it, there was a big change. It was no longer the territories, okay? I mean, the territories were really coming to their dying brouhaha in April of 87. You had the Mod Squad from Florida. They were ranked number 9, but it really was a Jim Crockett's promotion type of thing. You had very little matches or very little wrestlers. You could legitimately say that these weren't Crockett promoting wrestlers, you know what I mean? A year before, 86, you could say you had a bunch of Mid-South. You had the Fantastics. You had Williams, Steve Williams, and Ted DiBiase. What else about this tournament? It's interesting that this Crockett Cup was the only Crockett Cup that Tully and Arn did not compete in as a tag team. That was interesting to some extent. And when you might say, why? Why is that interesting? Well, just because it is. But you had Luger and Tully teaming up, and then Arn really got the shaft, man. Arn got teamed up with Kevin Sullivan, who wasn't a Horseman, and it was supposed to be Ole Anderson and Arn Anderson, but Ole had turned face for a couple of years, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Trying to say if there's anything. The other thing with this, I guess this video is really for the educated, the people that know about the Crockett Cup. Maybe I'll go back now and explain. If you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, the Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup was a tag team tournament for $1 million. 24 tag teams competed. How do you do a 24-team tournament? It's kind of like the NFL system where 16 teams were basically ranked 9 and 10 on the seeding, and then 11 through 24, meaning they really didn't have a seed. Okay, so 2 teams, 9 and 10, who were seeded but didn't really get a bye. Basically, the top 8 teams get a bye, and then teams 9 through whoever the fuck, 24, had to wrestle an extra match. So it was interesting because, you know, they really never, as far as I can remember, in those Crockett Cups, there was only 3 Crockett Cups, okay? 86, 87, and 88. By the time you were done with 88, they were selling out to the fucking Ted Turner people, and they didn't have the fucking Crockett Cup anymore. They could have, maybe, but they didn't. And the point is, I was lucky enough to be at one of them. And as a wrestling fan, I've had a pretty good run. Look, there's those assholes in the world that you see on TV every week, the fans that get the front row seat. You're like, oh, there's that guy and his mom, or whatever the fuck. Or there's Victor, whatever the fuck. There's those hardcore, insatiable, nutty fans who spend all their money. Or the guy with the hat and the sign. Or whatever the fuck. You have those fans that do go to every show. I wasn't one of those fans. I'm not claiming to be. But I do have a pretty good history of seeing live pro wrestling. Big shows. I don't have the best, but I don't have the worst either. Crockett Cup 87, let's go back there. Baltimore. Okay, now let me have a storyteller. Let me paint a picture. What was so great about the Baltimore Arena? I'm a fucking little kid, and I'm going to Baltimore. And this is where I learned to put my wallet in my front pocket, okay? Because when you go to Baltimore as a child, you need to know that you put your wallet in your front pocket, not your back pocket. All right? That's the first rule of Baltimore. Second rule is you just have fun. And it wasn't like a scary city at the time. It was just a cool city. I guess these are the days back when I was a kid. You know, we'd go to the Crockett Cup 87 and just having a good fucking time. And just the program. I still have the program. What a nice program. The Armstrongs were the big thing the first night. I think the Armstrongs were the only unrated team, or unfucking whatever the fuck team, unranked team to advance. And who were the Armstrongs? Brad Armstrong and Bob Armstrong, father and son. And that, even then, now if people who know your Brad Armstrong history, you know that this guy had all the talent in the world, and it's kind of a wrestling cliche that Brad Armstrong never did enough with his talent. But the Crockett Cup 87, him and his father won 2 matches, I believe, to get to the next round, and people were really jacked up about those guys. Like, oh my God, is Brad Armstrong actually going to do something this year? And he didn't, but we hoped he would. The first night also was interesting because Ric Flair came out and cut a promo just to kind of liven up the night a little bit, and Ric Flair came out, had a big match with Barry Windham the next night. But it was kind of interesting because we all kind of knew that Flair was going to leave with a belt because that feud was really like super into overtime, meaning the Flair Windham thing, as great as it was, their program had gone on for like 3 or 4 months, and it's like, okay, it doesn't seem like Barry's winning the title here. He's had a billion chances all over the fucking country, and we gotta move on. Let's get going. You know, like move on to the next challenger. And even as a young fan, you kind of knew when things ran their course, when you didn't know these terms like, oh, that's a program. You said, oh, that's a feud. Or Barry's the #1 challenger or contender or whatever the fuck. But at the point where at April 13th, you know, to fucking 1987, we're talking Reagan era, folks. You know, it's like, all right, time to move on. And Flair mentioned Jimmy Garvin a few times. He kind of dropped Jimmy Garvin's name for whatever the fuck reason. And I remember hearing that promo saying, oh, okay, so Flair's going to fight Jimmy Garvin next? Where's that coming from? And then shortly thereafter, they started their big, precious program for the summer of 87. What else? Pez Wadley and Tijo Khan were an interesting team. I think they lost to the Road Warriors. Talk about those Road Warrior pops. You know, people have that cliche. If you're a wrestler or a wrestling fan, Road Warrior pop, meaning the loud noise of the Road Warriors coming to the ring. Well, I experienced that. I did experience the Road Warrior pop. Okay? It's huge. It's awesome. I experienced the Hulk Hogan 85 pop. Alright? I've been around the block. What's next? Fucking next day. So we leave, and I just crashed at my friend's house. And all we did was talk about goddamn wrestling all night. And then it's, wow, going back to fucking Baltimore the next night. We're from Virginia. We're going to Baltimore as little kids to see this wrestling show. We got there the fucking second night. Then the second night, we only had 7 teams in the quarterfinals. There was that gaping hole. And they did not fill that gaping hole with anyone. There was no substitute team. That was a crock. And it's funny because I was pissed. As much wrestling as I was seeing, all these 23 tag teams, I wanted my 24th tag team. I really did. I was upset. So then we move forward, and we're seeing the Japanese team, and they got like this really weird kind of bye right into the semifinals or some such thing. Like, I'm trying to remember for sure, but I think the Japanese team, which was Giant Baba and somebody else, and it was a substitute for teammate for Baba. If you look into that, I'd be curious, because it was supposed to be Baba and someone of a pretty big name, you know, for late 80s Japanese wrestling, and then that guy couldn't show up, so they got another Japanese guy to team with Baba. Baba was a freaky looking dude, man. I mean, seeing Baba wrestle a couple of times was interesting, because he's in there fighting like Tully and Lex against Baba. And I know that match is not even on the fucking official Crockett Cup 87 VHS. Probably for rights or clearances or whatever the fuck. But to see Baba move around was very interesting. You know, just kind of like, whoa, that guy was like moving in slow motion. Tully and Lex got by them. I still have my handwritten program from the Crockett Cup. And what else? Dusty and Nikita. Dusty and the fucking Nikita, man. I mean, talking about the SuperPowers. And look, we saw him. We saw Magnum TA come out to the ring, alright? Magnum TA making really his first public appearance since his car accident. And if you're not a fan, if you don't know about this stuff, I don't know if I can explain it to you, but basically Magnum TA had a big car accident and wrapped his Porsche around a fucking telephone pole, and the guy who's going to be the Sting or the Seth Rollins or however you want to put it of that era couldn't do it because he lost his career in a fucking car accident, and everybody pretty much knew it. Like, we still had hope, you know, because nobody knew, but we were all kind of like, it was a weird moment because we all had this hope that Magnum would wrestle again, but we all kind of knew that he wouldn't. And it was a weird thing as a kid to just watch that and see, you know, one of the first touches of tragedy, to see Magnum come out and just know that, hey, he's alive, but he's not going to be able to wrestle anymore. And that striking mortality was evident. What else? You know, the Road Warriors and the Midnights had a great match. Jim Cornette. Really, I mean, I would say this. I mean, talk about a co-supporting team for that Crockett Cup was Midnights, who I guess they fought the Garvins, the Road Warriors, and the SuperPowers, meaning Dusty and Nikita. And I think you can't help but give it up, meaning applaud, Sweet Stan Lane, especially. I mean, I don't know if people really... I mean, look, I'm going to say this, and it's not to insult Bobby Eaton or anybody, but I think Sweet Stan Lane doesn't always get the credit he deserves as a really great tag team wrestler. We're talking Beautiful Bobby, and we're talking Steve Kern. And then Steve, you know, in my book, Stan Lane is a part of 2 Hall of Fame tag teams. Not that anyone, you know, I think the Fabulous Ones... they never had that AWA World title or anything, but they did quite a bit, the Fabulous Ones. And then to seemingly, with just 2 or 3 months off after Steve Kern retired for a cup of coffee, and Sweet Stan got this phone call to team with Bobby Eaton as the Midnights, and he just hopped right in there. In my book, it's not an offense to Dennis Condrey, but I think when Sweet Stan Lane got into the Midnight Express, that gave that whole team a whole new outlook, a whole new presentation, just cooler. And people forget that Sweet Stan would actually do mic work. He would introduce Jim Cornette, at least at the house shows. So anyway, they were really a kind of like a wow, that Midnight, and the Midnight Express in '87, man. I mean, talking about a tag team that really resurrected. It's not even just repackaged themselves with a new member. And once again, it's not an insult to fucking Dennis or fucking whoever the fuck, Randy Rhodes. But I do think people need to give a little more credit. At least balance the credit between Sweet Stan and Beautiful Bobby. I mean, everyone just loves to say how great Bobby is, but Bobby couldn't do any mic work. And, you know, his physique was a little unflattering. And so forth. I mean, I'm not against people. So the problem is you can't criticize a little bit or say, I don't see quite why people go nuts for this without people getting all up in arms. But it's just like I see that Bobby Eaton was great, and I'll tell a little Bobby Eaton side story. When I was a kid, I had this Superstar Pro Wrestling game, all these cards, and you know, I had a big tournament, like a big, huge 48-man NWA tournament. And the thing is, I only played that game, the Superstar Pro Wrestling game, with NWA wrestlers, okay? Not with WWF wrestlers. And I remember having this huge, crazy tournament, and the tournament was a shoot. Like, you'd play this game, it was like a wrestling role-playing game, and I would play it by myself. And Bobby Eaton won the fucking tournament. I think he beat either Flair or Road Warrior Hawk. It's pretty ridiculous. But Bobby Eaton was really a great wrestler. But I do think that Bobby Eaton also had a great tag team partner, namely Stan Lane. And it upsets me just a tinge when people kind of overlook that and just put all the great emphasis on Bobby. And I think Jim Cornette's a little guilty of that. No offense, Jim. Okay. What's next? Yeah. The Flair Windham match. You know, sometimes you don't, I guess this is a lesson, you don't appreciate things until they're gone. And I think, you know, being in that Crockett Cup arena, I did appreciate it, though. I mean, I'm not pissing on myself as a child, because I think I did get it. I did relish it. I did love it. But even still, you know, we were watching two maestros, the young maestro, Barry Windham, and the older one, Ric Flair, give us a beautiful fucking wrestling match. And I think we all appreciated it, but at the same time, maybe we didn't. I don't know. Okay? I do know that even as a small child, I pretty much knew that Flair was going to walk away with that belt. Because, like I said, that program, or feud, as we called it back then, was going on so long, you know. Other funny things, I remember someone having a Mulkymania sign, and that made the VHS presentation, you know, some fan just, they took the word Hulkamania and they scratched out or Sharpied out Hulka, and they just put Mulky. And I don't even know if they had Sharpies back then. But they put Mulkymania, that was a big thing. And the Mulkeys lost early in the tournament, which was a little disappointing. They lost to like Denny Brown and somebody. Maybe Nelson Royal and Denny Brown. What else? Just a really fun time. I remember after our first night, I guess I'll go back a little bit. I think after the Friday night at the tournament at the Baltimore Arena, and this is like way back when, folks. You didn't have GPS. You didn't have Yahoo Maps. You fucking drove places. You might get lost. Well, my friend's older brother, who we went to the show with the first night, fucking parked the car, and he had a Hallinger. He didn't have a Challenger. He had a Hallinger, like this old beat-up fucking 1972 piece of shit car that we always had a lot of fun in. But he parked it somewhere in the middle of fucking Baltimore. And then we're walking to find this goddamn thing. We can't find it. So, like, two little kids and a fucking 16-year-old kid are walking around at midnight in Baltimore looking for a car for an hour. And then, like, we started getting the vibe that, like, we're being followed by predators, bad people. So my friend's brother picked up a big stick. We're walking around Baltimore, a teenage guy and two little kids with a stick. But eventually, obviously, we found the fucking car and got home. Then we went all the way back to Baltimore the next day with my friend's father. What else? Just a really damn good show. I mean, and we got to that final match, Flair. I mean, like, the one thing that was a dick in the ass screw job was that we were asked to move our seats, or we were sitting in the wrong seats basically the first night and the first half of the second night. And somehow we were sitting there for this whole tournament, and then some fuckhead was like, oh, you're in our seats. Like, this thing is halfway over the second night. Basically, we were in the wrong seats the whole time. So we had to go to the fucking sky highs. We had to move from, like, really good seats up all the way up. And, like, it wasn't as good because we couldn't see shit. You know what I mean? But we could still see it. It just wasn't as good. But, yeah, the Crockett Cup, man, and the second show was, like, 3.5 hours. So the first night was 4.5. The second night's 3.5. That's 8 hours of live wrestling over 2 nights. The same arena. The same, more or less the same fans. And people today complain about, oh, it's too long. WrestleMania is too long. Yeah, what'd you do? You sat in your chair and you watched the network for 4 hours, 1 day a year, and that's a crisis to you? So my point is, folks, if you're a wrestling fan and you're sitting there watching WrestleMania 35 next year, or coming up in a few months, don't bitch and whine that it's too long. It's not too long. It's fine. Okay, be a man or be a woman. Enjoy the long wrestling show. Crockett Cup. I'm trying to think if I have any, like, great, profound... I mean, I don't know if these stories were interesting to you, but I mean, 24 tag teams, and it's interesting. How do you really promote... See, I don't even know if they'd have the balls to do that these days. Like, not an 8-team tournament, but like a fucking... And I know they did some dusty tag team tournament a few years ago that I think Samoa Joe and fucking Whistle Dick won. Finn Balor, I think that's who won it. But my point is,